Despite various games always having open-world aspects, the rolling fields of Hyrule in Ocarina of Time or the freeform exploration of Super Metroid, once Rockstar and GTA 3 proved you could structure an entire game around the environment that shook the foundations of the industry itself. Now, almost 2 decades later, because yes, people born in the year of GTA 3 are going to be 18 in 2019, how disgusting, the impact of Rockstar's masterpiece can be felt more than ever. Everything from Assassin's Creed to Absolver, Anthem to Just Cause has worlds positively bursting with things to see and do. Even veterans of the industry like Lara Croft, Mario, and Metal Gear made the jump, prompting the question, is every game made better by going open world? It's an interesting thought considering their endless popularity, but when so many AAA titles have adopted the formula, what does that mean for the competition? I'm Scott from WhatCulture.com, and because there were so many I wanted to include, these are the 12 most overlooked open world video games of the decade so far. Number 12, Dragon's Dogma. Lord help any RPGs that dropped in the shadow of the almighty Skyrim. They just didn't stand a chance. Dragon's Dogma was such an RPG, and despite releasing a year after Bethesda's all-conquering masterwork, it's gone on to become a bona fide cult classic, enjoyed by many dedicated fans, but not necessarily a wider audience. Still, Capcom delivered a number of things exquisitely well. From boss battles that connote the team-based delights of Monster Hunter to the pawn system. No, it's not Josh Brown's favorite app. Instead, it lets you equip a number of followers before letting them explore other people's games, returning with whatever loot and experience they accrue along the way. Yes, combat requires quite the learning curve, and the story is largely madness. You're on a quest to retrieve your own heart, but from its darkest dungeons to latching onto a griffin and writhing it out the sky into the ground, Dragon's Dogma is all kinds of epic, just waiting to be discovered. Number 11, The Surge. A follow-up to Lords of the Fallen from developers Deck 13, The Surge takes all the base tenets of Dark Souls and blasts them off into space. Sci-Fi Souls is literally what you're getting, though with a really neat twist. Limb targeting and execution choice dictates what loot and items an enemy drops. Say you like the look of some arm cannon or you've just been blasted apart by it multiple times, just aim at the enemy's arm and tear that thing right off. This is on top of a story that doesn't rely on interpretation or item descriptions to understand, instead being very upfront about your initially physically disabled protagonist being gruesomely fitted into an exosuit before exploring the infected station around him. Unlike Bloodborne and Dark Souls, such a simple and easy understanding of, okay, I'm the good guy, these are the bad guys, this is why I'm killing, works wonders in a genre always so devoid of overt purpose. The Surge might wear its influences on biomechanical sleeves, but in aping and innovating on a genre so closely, it provides a suitable spiritual sequel that's more than worth your time. Number 10, Mad Max. This is what you get when the Just Cause developers are allowed to let loose with a completely different IP. Mad Max's video game tie-in suffered immeasurably thanks to launching on the exact same day as Metal Gear Solid 5, thereby selling but a fraction of Hideo Kojima's final entry in the legendary saga. Still, Avalanche crafted a post-apocalyptic game that ticks all the right boxes. Brutal melee encounters where haymakers connect like shotgun blasts help punctuate some great on-foot segments. And that's before you get to the car combat, which plays like a more physics-based incarnation of Twisted Metal. Its world is one dotted with collectibles, enemy encampments, and car upgrades, all coming together to give you myriad reasons to dart off in any direction and chase the horizon to your heart's content. Oh, and this game's storms are some of the most ferocious, intimidating, and visually stunning in all of gaming. No joke, they're honestly quite frightening. Number 9, Darksiders 2. Darksiders 2 is such a well put together game from a franchise that really looked to be picking up huge amounts of steam, only to fall apart completely when THQ went under. Thankfully, we did eventually get a third installment in the supremely divisive, read it's fine if you really love the franchise, Darksiders 3, but 1 and 2 are still where it's at. A Devil May Cry / God of War style combat engine twins your ground attacks with some very simple and effective platforming. But it's Darksiders 2's world exploration and item progression that'll really hook you in. I'm putting it out there that this has the best loot system since Diablo 3. A constant rollout of new gear and spec'd up replacements for whatever you have equipped, allowing for all sorts of customization options for Death himself. As a series, Darksiders has one hell of an aesthetic that's almost like the continuation of Legacy of Kain. So if you like your characters big and bulky, your combat gruesomely meaty, and your stories epic and memorable, Darksiders is that Soul Reaver-esque experience that you never knew existed. Number 8, Mafia 2. You might already be acquainted with its more gore-happy sequel, Mafia 3, but if you want the pure Mafia experience, it resides in the second installment. Telling a more structured and nuanced tale than that of the revenge-driven Mafia 3, you reprise the role of Vito Scaletta, returning to a snow-caked New York after a stint in prison, only to be thrown back into a world of crime bosses, double crosses, and family feuds. The devil is in the details, as everything from repairing your vehicle to refueling it, customizing various aspects of your ride, or interacting with the environment all help to showcase a level of immersion that was later removed from Mafia 3. If you're after an open world game with a far more unique and memorable setting than just another brown and grey modern city, plus a phenomenal script with great dialogue exchanges and ace characters, give this middle installment a chance. Lastly, as a fun game fact, Mafia Mafia 2 is the one game where Nolan North contributed so much NPC and pedestrian dialogue he can be heard having conversations with himself. Number 7. Watch Dogs 2. What is it with Ubisoft and sequels? Both Assassin's Creed and Watch Dogs benefited hugely from putting a step forward and having it snapped off, only to return years later with what should have debuted all along. In Watch Dogs 2's case, every last part of the whole hack the world ethos was taken to the extreme. Suddenly you weren't just limited to hacking people's personal data, now you could control cars, forklifts, security cameras, drones, and more. If done right, you could even finish some of the missions from outside the combat area, safely tucked away around a corner, ordering your army from the comfort of a laptop. Therein lies the brilliance of Watch Dogs 2, and although its sales most likely mean Ubisoft might abandon a third installment altogether, there's a lot of fun to be had in remotely accessing every device known to humankind. Number 6. Kingdoms of Amalur: Reckoning. Springing forth from a larger MMO that was ultimately canned, Kingdoms benefited from having a lore and cast of characters befitting a few 100-hour-long experience. Unlike Fable, its nearest comparison from the time, Amalur's combat has far more in common with God of War. Its meaty battles punctuated by satisfying thwacks and smashes, as boss battles end with gloriously over-the-top quick-time events. Playstyles vary from actually workable stealth in an RPG, I know, to playing the distant mage or upfront fighter. All this progression through the world is more tied to exploration and side quests than a dedicated campaign. Thankfully, it doesn't hurt when these gargantuan expanses of code were built to house hundreds of players at once, giving Kingdoms of Amalur a unique feel all its own. Number 5. Batman: Arkham Origins. The one Arkham game that Time and Rocksteady forgot. Sadly, arriving in 2013, not 2 years after Arkham City and being developed by a different studio, was all it took to make the masses flip the collective finger, reducing the actually pretty well-written Origins to the discard pile. Even watching the credits for Arkham Knight saw Rocksteady scrub this thing from existence, as we recap the events of the Arkham games, not even including Origins whatsoever. Yes, combat is more of the same, but it's the story and characterization that really excels. Set 2 years after Bruce becomes Batman, we get to see things like the origins of Joker's relationship to the Cape Crusader himself, or from the Clown Prince's perspective. This is alongside a more in-depth detective mode where you reassemble fragmented crime scenes and tackle some franchise best bosses in between. The Deathstroke fight alone deserves to be up there with Mr. Freeze, and that's before you realize the latter was done the utmost justice in the Cold Cold Heart DLC. If you're a true Bat fan, there's a lot to love when it comes to a different developer tackling the motivations and world of the Dark Knight himself. Number 4. Tomb Raider 2013. For whatever reason, Crystal Dynamics' rebooted Raider trilogy never had the same impact as her canon-chested original. Even Rise of the Tomb Raider couldn't catapult our favorite female adventurer back into the limelight, and Shadow of the Tomb Raider sold even worse. All that said, while I can't necessarily recommend Rise or Shadow, I can totally get behind the original as it's bold as hell. Complementing an excellently laid out map with a set of abilities that gradually get expanded upon, there's a real sense of survival to Lara's shipwrecked story, one that takes you across some pretty varied levels with excellent combat encounters and set pieces. Gunplay itself feels meaty and tactile in a way that even Uncharted occasionally doesn't. And although many have criticized how much Lara gets carried away being totally nonchalant about murdering people with an axe, it all helps you embody the mentality of someone just struggling to make it to the next campfire. Number 3. Assassin's Creed Syndicate. The last of the traditional Assassin's Creeds before AC Origins did a quasi-reboot and made the whole franchise play like open world everything the game, Syndicate delivers a far more solid stealth experience than the roundly despised Assassin's Creed Unity. It just came at a time when nobody cared. Still being set in Victorian London and letting you alternate between twins Jacob and Evie Fry, Ubisoft finally upgraded the core mechanics of the game, giving you a threat ring indicator for encroaching enemies and a one-button stealth mode toggle so you could finally slink around in confidence. Gorgeous graphics and the best recreation of old Blighty's capital seen in video games to date. If any part of you has mellowed since the great facial glitch of 2014, or you just want an Assassin's Creed that doesn't require a few hundred hours to finish, Syndicate provides a playground that's a blast to explore. Number 2. The Witcher 2: Assassins of Kings. Despite its third installment being one of the best games of the generation hands down, and the one that saw the highest sales of the bunch, The Witcher as a series initially hit its stride in the second installment. A far more learned experience than Wild Hunt, Assassins of Kings has more methodical gameplay, forcing you to ensure your blades are coated in the right oils for certain monsters, role-playing Geralt in more specific ways, brewing potions, spending time meditating, and treating each combat encounter like a proper challenge. There's even a point where you're asked to make a choice, one that splinters the remainder of the story into two completely separate games replete with characters, environments, and much more. Whichever you choose means the other half will be locked off for that particular playthrough. Yet for a developer to commit to such a decision and do so with the utmost confidence is an innovation in narrative design that can't go unrewarded. If you played and liked The Witcher 3, give its predecessor a go. Geralt's second adventure is an altogether different beast, but it's just as worthwhile. Number 1. Yakuza 0. Yes, recent Yakuza installments have finally started to find an audience in the West thanks to Yakuza 1 and 2 getting re-released and updated, plus the latest installment, Yakuza 6, had a revamped combat system, but it's the throwback retro charm of Yakuza 0 that you need to check out. All the Yakuza games, especially from 3 onwards, come with a mishmash of Metal Gear Gear Solid-esque overacting and crazy plot reveals, plus third-person brawler combat and brutally over-the-top anime-esque finishes. In Yakuza 0's case, Sega have implemented a number of different fighting styles you can switch to on the fly, alongside minigames like pool, darts, mahjong, managing businesses, and going off to the batting cages. There are tons of shops to visit, all stocked with photoreal products too, dating, scores of side quests, and endless memorable characters. All of this in a fantastically realized, energetically 80s setting. From taking on an entire building's worth of enemies to disco dancing the night away and getting blurry-eyed off some vintage sake, there's a genuinely lovable tone to everything about Yakuza, and Yakuza 0 in particular, that way more people need to experience. And that's my list. Let me know down in the comments which open world games it felt like only you played, and feel free to check out shop.whatculture.com for our lovely array of t-shirts and hoodies. I've been Scott from WhatCulture.com. Please check out the WhatCulture Gaming Podcast, and I'll catch you soon.